Welcome back to the Heal with Gold show at a different time, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm happy to be here. If you join in, please do me a favor and tell me who you are. Give me your name because if you didn't approve StreamYard, I will not see your name. I'm just going to know that there is somebody there, and I would love to acknowledge you. I am very happy to bring Jonathan Bogner to the stage. Jonathan had the two strokes, just like my husband. And this month, March, is brain injury month. I don't know, when we started having a month for everything. Actually, today is a National Laughter Day. So there's always a day for something. But I'm happy to bring visibility to TBIs, to brain injury. And I'm so happy to bring somebody who is thriving, who is so resilient despite so much health adversities. Jonathan will share his story of strokes, but also of a heart transplant. And I am so curious about that, and I hope you're too. And please feel free to ask questions, and Jonathan will answer them, when the time comes. So without further ado, let me welcome to the stage Jonathan Bogner.
Thank
Hello,
you. Thank you so
Jonathan.
much. I really appreciate being on your show. And I'm just going to give you a little background of what happened to me. I'm uniquely qualified to be on your show because, as you mentioned, I had two strokes, heart failure, aphasia, 16 years ago, and I had a heart transplant about a year and a half ago. So I kind of have come through, the whole ritual of stroke, heart failure to a heart transplant. So my story is pretty simple. I was selling a movie in Park City, and I just came home back from selling my movie, which was a success. And I just had two strokes, heart failure, aphasia, and I was rushed to the hospital. And the weird thing when you have the stroke, yes, you have brain injury. And recently I was asking my neurologist, how much brain injury did I have? And fortunately, you mentioned your husband. Fortunately, I think I got, I would say 95% all of my, uh, all the things that you normally deficits normally that you have. I got them all back. But when you have aphasia, you cannot speak. And for about a year and a half, I couldn't speak, but I could hear. And the frustrating thing is, and I have so much empathy for people who when you get older you can't find the words, or what's happening but you can't verbalize it. I have so much empathy with people who have those issues. So I couldn't speak, but I understood. And I remember when I was going to speech therapy, the therapist was saying to my wife that, and I couldn't say her name, which is so simple. Her name is Cindy, and how easy is that? But I couldn't say Cindy. I say Candy. And the speech therapist said to my wife, I was there, saying like, this is probably as good as it's gonna get. And I was so angry. And I knew, and I had my stroke when I was 45 years old. This is the peak time for most men to kind of put money away aside, and your peak of your career. And it was just taken away from me. And I wanted to say to speech therapists, like, I can speak. I will not. This is not it. This is not it. This is going to get better. But eventually,
Jonathan, I just wanted to share with you because this is so what you're saying to me. You have no understanding like how much I understand what you're explaining.
Mhm.
The first person that I ever interviewed in this show, and I've done about 80 shows, was Paul Cummings. I don't know if you know Paul, but he is a speaker. He used to go all over the world speaking in large corporations and wrote books. And he had a massive stroke, and he has aphasia, and he couldn't speak. And he talks about the frustration of how you don't lose intellect, you just lose the ability to communicate. And he couldn't read, write, or speak for a while until he had to teach himself. But he mentioned the exact same thing of what you're saying, is that the people that surrounded you in the medical field was
Yeah.
not giving the hope that you need to be able to heal and overcome it. So it's fascinating that in this day and age, we still have healthcare providers with so many stories like yours, right? This is why these types of shows are so important, because if nurses are going to hear it, and the speech therapists are going to hear it, that they shouldn't go into patients, into the rooms at their vulnerable state and tell them this is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
It infuriates me.
But with all understanding the speech therapist, and I don't want to dwell too much. I want to get into the meat of my story. But with the speech therapist, I was doing speech therapy for about 6 months at that point, and at the same time, I couldn't say, I mean, I was stumbling over the alphabet, and I still don't. I have deficits, but the deficits you would not know. Most people who knew me before, they know that there was I used to speak even faster. So they said, it slowed me down, which is a good thing. So when I had the strokes and aphasia, and I'm repeating myself, and the heart failure, my wife actually insisted that because my heart pumping, it's called the ejection fraction, was so damaged, and my ejection fraction before I got the heart transplant was 15. So the average person, their ejection fraction is between 50 and 70. So clearly 15 is not a good position to be in. And when I got the heart transplant, my ejection fraction was 9. So what we did, because my wife didn't want to wake up and I would be dead, she selfishly, but at the same time she was considerate. We made sure that I got what's called a defib, and I have one of the defibs that was in my heart.
Wow.
So and the reason I got it is because I asked the surgeon, "Can you give it to me?" And he said, "This is not really allowed, but maybe we missed it, and it wound up in your hands." So that's the story of the first defib, which is, if people don't know what a defib is, you remember you go into schools, rock concerts, ball games, the airport, they always say, stand back, and they shock the heart. They shock the heart to get you back into your rhythm. So I had an internal defib in my chest. When I went and I didn't have a shirt on, people asked, like, people like will say the weirdest things, like, "What is that?" And I said, like, "Well, that's my garage door opener. I can open my garage door and turn my TV on using my chest." And I'm like, one person like, "Really?" It's like, yeah. So I had the defib for 16 years. And I was very attached to my defib, and I have a website all about my journey called personalstories.net. if you want to read a little bit more about what happened with my defib. So I had my defib, and ultimately, I got shocked right before I had the heart transplant 2 times. So that's really unusual. So the defib went off 8 times, but the last time it went off 2 times, and that is very, very concerning. So the paramedics put me into I went to the hospital, and I had what's called pulmonary edema, meaning my lungs were filling up with water, and I couldn't really breathe, shortness of breath, and with the defib, when you get shocked multiple times, it's cause for alarm. So I went into the hospital, and they said, you're not going to come out until you get a new heart. At that point, I was on the heart transplant list, but I was number 5 on that list, meaning I was well enough to stay at home, that I didn't need to go into the hospital, so I would have to wait until the hospital called. And when you are in the hospital, the categories are 1 to 3, and I was listed as a 3, meaning I didn't need multiple organs. So you get a rise when you have multiple organs, and then you're so sick, you're on a ventilator. But I was in the hospital, so I got a heart within 30 days, and getting the heart, it's real. When you get a heart, all jokes aside, it is so real that it's happening, and you get that call. I got my call at 2 a.m. Of course, I called my wife and my son, and it was just real at that point. And they, you they crack your ribs. They give you, the new heart. They put you on what's an ECMO machine. It's a machine that breathes for you. It's a heart-lung machine. And I got a woman's heart. So a lot of people get, their matching heart. So it's a man, you get a man's heart. A woman, you get a woman's heart. The blood type was the correct blood type. And I'm not a big guy, so I sound big on a podcast, and I project a little bit bigger than I am, but I'm 5'6", and I weigh about 120 pounds. So the hospital said, we've got a woman's heart. They didn't actually give me a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, when I wrote a story about getting a woman's heart, I was thinking, like, wow, what would happen if I said, well, I'm not comfortable with getting a woman's heart? At that point, everyone was ready to do the surgery. I wanted the woman's heart. For me, it was a cool thing. It was
Yeah.
not, we didn't really have an opportunity to think through this. And ultimately, I would get the woman's heart. Okay.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's I think a curiosity thing that people have.
Yeah.
Did you feel that you changed in your personality once you got the heart? I think that it doesn't even matter if it's a woman's heart or not. There are some changes, but even more so, having a woman's heart, do you feel changed? Based on the physicality. I'm not talking about the view in life, the new chance. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like a really internal change.
Well, yeah. I mean, clearly, if you look at a man's heart, a woman's heart, it beats a little faster than a man's heart, and they're a little smaller than a man's heart. Okay, so those are kind of the mechanical differences between a man's and a woman's heart. When you get an organ, we're talking about getting someone else's organ. clearly someone had to die. You feel, and I always thought like, wow, someone had to die to give me their organ and give me their heart. So you have a, you have an ability to write a letter if you want to write a letter to the family that donated the heart. And originally, going back to your question, how did I change? Did I change? I think getting someone else's DNA in me, you have memories, the heart, you have memories stored in that DNA. And that memory, it's not a memory that you remember what happened to you when you went to somewhere and it was not, it was an out of body experience, but the DNA of the heart has its own memory, and getting a heart also. And I can't just determine if it was getting the heart or what happened to me when I get the heart. I think I have much more empathy today. You could say that that's due to, it could be due to all the drugs I take. So I have to take, when I got out of the hospital, I was taking 40 pills a day, 40 pounds a day times 7, it's 320. And now I'm taking about 25 pills a day. So it's still a lot of anti-rejection pills I take. So the heart, the heart will stay in my body and won't, cause me too many difficulties. So take 3 meds to anti-rejection meds with other meds. And so did it change me? I mean, that's a really profound question. And I don't know if I can do it justice, but over the year or the year and a half now that I've had the heart, it has changed me. And I don't sound like I'm, slowing down, but it slowed me down. And it changed me to value the things that, and my priorities have changed. My relationships with my family have changed. Whether they think it has changed or not, I know it has changed. My friendships are much deeper, and I value those friendships more than ever. And so, and I now try to do things that I want to do more than I have to do, and more than people like, oh, can I do this for you? So I'm much more selective about my time, because when you get a heart, you really have to think about how long will you live. So there's a profound realization that, it's all almost, it's like cancer, getting a heart, 1 year out, 5 years out, 10 years out, and I looked at a lot of the data about getting a woman's heart for getting a woman's heart for a man's body. It's, your life expectancy is between 10, if you're really healthy, to 20 years. So, and I want to make the most of it. So I'm much more selective, and I try to do things. I'm very effusive, and I've got lots of friends. But I also, you go to bed alone, you wake up alone, even though you have a mate or someone next to you, and in a weird way, you kind of die alone. So I spend a little more time on my own. And so has it changed me? Yeah, it has changed me. Now, the medical reasons versus the psychological reasons, the medical reasons, the woman, my donor, had two issues. She has, and most women have it, which I didn't realize. Not men don't have it. It's it's they have the heart has, it's like rapid beating of the heart. And I take a, ultimately after, a couple visits to the hospital, there's two drugs I take to slow down the heart. And then I've got a virus, which I didn't have prior to the surgery. And after I got the surgery, or I got the heart, the woman had this virus. It's 50% of the world has it. I didn't have it. And it has come back a couple times, and we're just still dealing with it right now. Fortunately, it's non-determinant. It's below the radar. So there are lots of other issues that you deal with when you get someone else's organ. So, but yeah, it's you look like you have a question.
Yeah, I'm curious about the family because
Yeah,
experiencing something so traumatic, it is extremely traumatic for the patient. First, it's traumatic physically. Second, it's traumatic emotionally to deal with our mortality. Is not something that nothing prepares us for it, especially like you were so young.
yeah,
And then there is the caretakers and the people at home that also, it's like we don't get any pity. The patient gets some pity, but the
yeah.
people at home, we don't get any compassion. We're fine, but the reality is that we're not so fine. How is your wife? How has she handled all of that? Because that's a lot of trauma.
Yeah, my wife, unfortunately, one of our sons has really serious issues with his colon. And right now, young man, 28 years old, has a bag, a colostomy bag. So we have gone through that trauma with him. My wife has her own uh, health issues. And so I wouldn't, her mother lived with us for a little bit of time when she was going through Alzheimer's. So my wife is not um, afraid of health issues, but at the same time, it was a lot. And also, I'm very independent. I want to do too much. And so, combining, she wants to help and I want to do things myself, cause a little bit of complications. But I don't know how she felt, but I can tell you how I felt with her. And I was very I tried to be sympathetic, but sometimes, and I'm blaming my drugs, but if you look at the labels and all the side effects, it causes your emotions to change. And sometimes I was not the nicest person to be around, and I was short tempered. And being short tempered, you don't have a way of, you're so direct. So, it's like, can you do this? Do this, do this. And there's no nice way of asking. So I felt that she has dealt with a lot of issues for, her whole life, and also mental issues and psychological issues dealing with me. And I want to say I'm a model patient. I don't know what she would say. My doctors say I'm a model patient, but I don't know what she would say. But she would say, health wise, he's great. He's a little short tempered. And I blame that on me and the drugs. So and the interesting thing is, my son was one son I don't speak to because he never called me when I was in the hospital, and he had his own reasons, which I don't know. You know, I think certain reasons, um, using the word Trump, but trump other things. So whatever your emotions or hurt feelings were, you have to overcome them. And I think he's got a lot of growing up to do. And I've changed, but he remains the first son. He remains the same way, and the other son, he was moving to New York, but he had a lot of his. He was leaving San Francisco to move to New York, and he was staying with us in that interim period, and he had to go back to San Francisco to pick up some of his stuff. And he drove to San Francisco, and at that moment, when he got to San Francisco, I made that call to him and said, I got the heart. Wow, it just brings a tear to my eyes. I can't believe he just drove back home because he wanted to be with me. So yeah, he was unbelievable.
That is amazing. You
Yeah.
mentioned before about a letter to the family. Did you, or to the person who
Yeah.
gave you the heart? So tell me about this letter. I remained curious.
I'm glad you brought that up, and we're going back on the letter. So originally, I was so overjoyed that I got the heart. I just can't. I was on cloud nine. I don't even know what cloud nine is, but I was just on top of the world. And so I wanted to write that letter immediately, and I wrote it, and I didn't send it the first month. Like, I wrote this letter, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then I waited until the end of the year, because you have a year. And so at the end of the year, I I had more perspective, because at the beginning I didn't know about the issues of the heart. And so I had some um, you know, major issues getting that heart for the last year. And then I couched it in a way that I was both appreciative and for them and their daughter, but it was not as over enthused. I was enthusiastic, but it was not the same letter I was going to write the first month. It was having a year to understand what the heart meant, and the issues of getting an organ changed my letter to the family. And they never responded to me anyway, but and maybe that's on YouTube. People write these letters, and the family, they have these kumbaya moments, and they're all on video, and it's like fantastic. I thought that was going to happen to me, and that's like one in 100,000 that you get those reactions. But most of the people, you get the letter and thank you. It also reopens wounds that you don't want. You're innocent about those wounds with the family who lost the daughter. So I did the right thing,
Yeah.
and I felt good about my letter.
No, 100%. You know, it's
Oh,
very, it's a double, how do you say, a double-edged sword for them. There is a continuity of their wife, of their daughter, of her life, but at the
yeah,
same time, it's such a reminder
yeah,
that they no longer have her, and maybe they had their feelings about their daughter's heart going into a man. Maybe that was also something tricky for them to, just to wrap their heads around it. I don't know. I would think that this is something that they would say, maybe if it was another woman, they would feel their
mhm,
closeness you know. Uh, but then being a man, maybe that was something difficult for them to rationalize. I think that there is so much that we just don't understand about other people's experiences. That's why I wanted to hear about your wife and her strength and her resilience, is because we take for granted the every party. You know, when my husband had his stroke, his second stroke, he actually collapsed at home, and he was extremely anemic, and we were at the top of the stairs, and he almost fell. He passed out and he was throwing up, and I grabbed him from the back of his shirt to make sure that he didn't slid down the stairs. I'm freaking out, and I decided to call 911. Even though my daughters were home, they were on the other side of the house, they couldn't hear me. But that spot was a spot that I didn't have connection. So I'm dialing 911, it just doesn't connect. So I start screaming hysterically. Still, my daughters can't hear me. They are in the bathroom, the farthest bathroom, putting nail polish with the fan on so it wouldn't be too smelly for my husband. And I left him safe, passed out. I run to my daughters, and I asked the older one to please call 911 for me, and to, for no reason, to let my youngest come out of the bathroom. Like, her job is not to let the youngest out. And the reason I'm mentioning this story is because my daughter became very traumatic from it. It was a terrible experience for her, because her mother, who's I'm very strong. I'm the strength in the house. I was always the strength. I'm screaming. I'm losing, mm, completely. And I'm saying to the older one, do not let her come out. Now, in my mind, I'm protecting her
Mm.
from seeing her father, who's like blue, passed out in a puddle of vomit. I want to protect her from it. But for her, I was denying her to see and to assess and make sense of the situation. So she remained in a state of complete pain and fear and shock in the bathroom. So with a year later, after I was able to assess the situation and how that may have made her feel, I took her out and I apologized. And we just don't know, because sometimes we do things with the best of intentions, but it is not what the person needed. And everyone involved, I think, have something to learn from the experience. We need to go through that also, to make some sense of things in our lives, or to define our purpose, and to learn and give meaning to whatever it is that we're doing. People see my husband, and his face is the same, his body is the same, he walks the same. His aphasia is very, very minimal, so you don't really, here and there he loses words, but he never unlearned to speak. But he lost memory, he lost cognition, he lost vision, and he lost tact. So sometimes he says very hurtful things.
Mhm.
And this is stuff that people outside, they don't know, right? That it's a faceless disability. It's an invisible situation. And what I'm experiencing, it's in a way, it's a lonely road, and the caretakers really should be supporting one another. I am in a few groups of caretakers, and I recommend for your wife, because first, she has so much to teach, lessons that she learned from your medical experience, and also from what she went through. Listen, I speak today and I say, I'm not so sure, what I protected my daughter. I did what I thought it was right at that moment, but today I would have done it differently. Today I would have first spoken to her, hugged her, and said, Dad is very ill, but we're going to take him to the hospital, and God willing, he's gonna get better. Do you want to see him? Do you want to come close? What would you want? And I think that sometimes we dismiss children because they're kids. She was 13 or 14 at that time, 13, and we dismiss them because they're kids. But I believe they have a soul inside that it's not bound by age, and
Yeah,
they have these experiences, and we have to recognize it.
right.
So when I mentioned that my husband lost some tact and that sometimes he says things that are painful, I saw a recognition in you. Like, is that something that you can relate?
Yeah, no, I think everything you said, you just you dismiss the your kids. Every second counts with you and your husband. It's oxygen to the brain. I mean, the brain will die if you don't get oxygen, and so it's interesting. We use the word empathy. I feel like I have empathy, but I don't have omniscient. I don't see 360 degrees. So I'm viewing the world through my lens, my eyes. And yeah, my wife has been remarkable, unbelievable, remarkable. And sometimes I um, don't see it through her eyes, and she doesn't see it through my eyes. And so it's empathy is a little overused, but you have to see things 360 degrees to see what other people see and what their point of view is. And I don't know if that's possible. Okay, I think you can understand sometimes, but you don't see it from their point of view, because we're all different people and we have different perspectives, and we all have really um especially 13. I mean, they have opinions, they have, think about yourself when you're 13. Everyone has their own opinions, point of views, and they see things differently, even though it's like being a witness, right? Two people witness a crime and they both say it differently. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you can see the same thing, but it's viewed through your own lens.
Hmm.
So, and so talking about, my first son, it's like, I don't know what his issue. I think I know what his issues are, but his issues were he was projecting through his wife's lens to hurt me, but it was not through his lens, but he was trying to protect his wife. And so, it's very complicated, you know, and that's why I'm not a rabbi or a priest or someone who understands everything. And I don't think anyone can ever understand everything. You just have to recognize different points of view. And sometimes, like your husband, and I feel the same way, you want to go, you with the brain. They have synapses in the brain, and when the brain is damaged, and your husband's brain was damaged, my brain was damaged, and thinking about a supermarket, right? You go directly to the frozen section. Boom, you make a beeline, that's where you're going. Maybe your husband, and definitely me, I don't know directly where I want to go. I go a little bit around to get to the frozen section. So think about it from our point of view. The brain has some injury, and whether it's apparent, but it's apparent to your husband, it's apparent to me. I I have difficulty with the alphabet today. I have difficulty with right left. I have cognitive disabilities, but they're not obvious,
Mhm.
right? So, like when I remember when I had when I was driving, I had a placard that said disabled, and I parked, and someone, was saying like, "Oh, this guy's not disabled," and then I'm like, I pulled up my chest. It's like, what do you think these are? You know what I'm saying? This is a scar that goes from my neck down to my navel. That I didn't go to war. This is my war. This is my internal, but unless you have a broken leg or your broken arm, it's not visible. So both so you have to see the invisible scars, but the invisible scars are not apparent. And so we meet people, see people all the time, and we have no idea what's going on. I always walk around our block with my wife, and we're like, when you open up someone's door, physically and emotionally, their door, you don't know what's behind it. And it could be joy, it could be such tragedy. And we just don't know, mental, physical, health wise, we have no idea. So all we can do is live a relentless life, be alive, have compassion, which it's a journey. To have compassion, it's not given. And I practice what's rigorous optimism, because you don't wake up every single day and feel optimistic. I question, that hey, I'm optimistic. Okay, you're optimistic today. Are you going to be optimistic tomorrow or next week? So I practice rigorous optimism, meaning it's hard work to be optimistic. And some days you have bad days, and some days you have good days, and some days are just okay. But that's it's like playing a golf king. 71 is even par. If you get a little bit under, you look great. If you get a little over, it's fine. But you just have to maintain a certain, you know, like buoyancy. It's almost like a submarine. They go up and down, but there's still in like a rhythm. So I feel like life is practicing optimism, but it's hard work. It's being and trying to be alive, and it's so cliche. Say, oh, smell the roses. You don't literally have to smell the roses, okay? Most roses don't smell anyway, okay? So I can tell you that so it's just being alive. And then you have to be resilient. All the stuff that goes on every single day of your life. You know what you want to do, and focus on what you need to do. And and I think you also have to do exercise. And most people either don't do it, they don't like it, and it's work. Yeah, everything is work. Okay, exercising is work. So whether you like to do it or you don't like to do it, you will live longer. You guaranteed you will live a longer life.
You're so true. I wanted you started talking about that type of work, right? The work on that we have to do with ourselves. But I became very curious about your work. You were a producer. I think people are always very curious about the world of film and TV. You did a lot of reality TV, correct?
Yeah, I've produced 14 films. Still trying to produce another film. I've done 12 reality shows. Did a couple documentaries, and I think life has an absurdity you know, you have to look at life as um, it's everyone has a story, and whether that story needs to be told or should be told, that's all about having, connections to get to the right person who can help you get it to, there's a whole series of dating, meaning, there's lots of gatekeepers, and you have to go through all those gatekeepers. So yeah, I've done about 12 reality shows. I'm still trying to do a reality show, and it has to be something that I'm interested in, and I'm not a mercenary. It's like you can't hire me to do something which you used to do. I could be very more like a mercenary. I would just go in and sell something, whether I believed it or not. Now I want to do something, in my life. What I'm trying to do, if someone has a great idea, send me your great idea. Okay. And I've recently optioned a book that I feel passionate about. I've got a reality show I feel passionate about. And most of the time I'm focusing on what I can do right now. And what I can do right now is create. And I'm trying to create with a world that I'm slowly exploring with the American Heart Association. I'm trying to, I came up with what's called a, highlight or sizzle reel, whether they want to use it or not. I come up with ideas, and I'm a creative person, and now I can, because there's no barriers to entry. You can film yourself, I can film myself, I can speak, I can do my voiceover, and you can cut something together. I've got lots of relationships. But going back to your question about, everyone thinks they have a good story, the, and everyone has a good story. And I'm trying to get all those great stories together on my website, personalstories.net. And if you send me your story, I would try to interview you. And ultimately, I want to try to sell that to a network or a streaming service. Like, okay, these are American stories of triumph, disaster, and ultimately triumph. And right now, I'm focusing on health stories, but it doesn't have to be health stories, because clearly that's where my heart is, literally.
It's fascinating. I think that the world of social media gave an insight to people about what it means to create something, to have a good story, to have a good hook, to bring people in, because the majority of the people don't have huge audiences. The majority of the people don't have people that are captivated continued captivated by the work. It's tough. People that go into trying to create those channels, they understand what it takes to create a good idea, to film well, to speak well. And I think that people became even more intrigued by the whole world of film and reality TV, because now we understand a little bit better what it takes to create something like that. So I think it's fascinating, and I think people want to tell their stories more than ever. I find it that in today's days, because speeches around about shame and vulnerability, people are more open and willing to share their story that once upon a time maybe filled them with shame. Today, they can feel, empowered by sharing, because they know it could be helping somebody else. And actually, I don't know if I mentioned to you that I am super obsessed with the Japanese art of kintsugi. Did I mention it to you?
clearly, yeah, because that's your website too.
On my website, on my wall, on my
Yeah.
table, everywhere. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because what they did when they created this art was to take away the shame from the brokenness. Because instead of trying to hide the breaks, they highlighted with gold. And the meaning behind it to me, and we spoke a little bit about it in our previous conversation, but I think that, and we may disagree with that, but is that we can find meaning and purpose in the brokenness. The story, whatever it is that happened to us that it's hard, can become the the reason for our living forward in a way that it brings us a lot of meaning. And I know that when I started the show and I wrote my book and I started talking a little bit more about all of like becoming more resilient and kintsugi, I touched a lot of people's hearts in messages that they shared with me in private afterwards about how it was meaningful to them. I said, you know what? So it's not that I wanted to go through all the difficult things that I went through, but if I was able to make their lives better a little bit, that gives purpose to whatever mess happened in my life. And I think that people notices that because when they share of their lives, they're open, they share the lessons that they learn, and other people benefit from it, it reduces their pain. So I think that that's the power of people's stories. And people that watch the stories feel less alone in whatever it is that they're going through. They say, "Oh, I'm not an anomaly. Anomaly. I'm not being punished. I actually gave a lecture about, am I being punished when I'm going through all of the adversities that I go through? Is that a punishment?" And it was a more spiritual talk and a little bit more religious talk where I brought examples from the Old Testament of very holy people going through very difficult things. And they were not punishments, but they are what makes us grow. And like you said, you want to be and live an optimistic life. And that requires work, just like going to the gym, right? It requires work. You need to make a commitment to it and you need to be willing to work really hard at it. And I think that the adversities and the breaks that we experience in life, it is that is creating the scenario for the work that we need to do to become improved versions of ourselves, even though we have been broken, even though we had to go through, you know, health crisis, emotional crisis, all kinds of different losses. At the end of the day, it builds up the person that we are. To become an optimistic person or a person who's focused on being joyful despite going through such adversity, it's tremendous beautiful work. And I for one commend you for it, and that you inspire me. The work that you're doing inspires me. You going around and sharing your story inspires me and gives me strength to be the caretaker. I've seen hearing from other patient's point of view inspires me. Um, Here we have a comment. Shame is handed down the generations and kept secret. Let us to open the door and step out of that closet. 100%. I think that we hide. We used to hide behind so much shame, but today, I think we can see those stories as badges of honor. And I think that's why I'm so connected to Kintsugi. I think I was tired of living in shame, and I said, "Heck with it," you know. Let whatever broke be my badge of honor. And I think that you're doing incredible justice to your story by sharing and inspiring other people. And I wanted to ask you one last question. What is your last message that you want to leave with the audience who's here? Thank you, Suzette, for your comment. Please, whoever watches this show, share because you don't know whose life is going to be improved by it. Please, Jonathan, share something, one thing, that one message that you want to leave us with.
I don't think there's one message. I just want to kind of encapsulate a couple messages. Okay. Life can change in an instant. You just walk out the door, boom, life can change, whether it's good or bad, life can change. And you have to be relentlessly alive. You just have to, try to be, alive. And it's so cliche, live in the moment. But you know what? There's kind of there's truthisms in all these expressions. So I want to, live my life again relentlessly alive, and rigorous optimism. It's work to be optimistic. So a lot of the things you said, I'd love to discuss that at another time. But yeah, I mean, you don't know what's going on in other people's world, and we don't know exactly what's going on with your kids or your friends, but at the same time, just try to be more empathetic. I also want to say to my wife, I appreciate whatever she's done for me. So sometimes it doesn't come across that well, but I want to tell you, I love her, and I hope she feels the same way. So, but so at the same time, if you can change your mind, you can change your life. If you can change your mind is so powerful. It can change your life. So that would be my message to you and any viewers. But it's been a joy talking to you. I see you've got a few viewers, but it was a pleasure talking to you. Whether it's just you and me or someone else chimes in, it's just been my joy talking to you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It was inspiring to speak to you, and I have a feeling that we will continue our friendship behind the scenes,
Yeah,
uh, somewhat. And I have no doubt that your wife loves you very much.
yeah,
And, and it was very sweet to hear this. And please share it with her if she's not watching it live, so she
yeah.
will get to see it also. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Heal with Gold show. I want to share with you that my course is going to be coming out very, very soon. And what Jonathan said is the basis of my show: change your mind and you'll change your life. And that is what the course is about: is how do you become the boss of your mind? Because your mind takes you to dark places at times, and we can choose to boss it around. Instead, we try to boss everybody, right? We tell other people what they have to do, and we know what's right for every country, for every politician, and for every neighbor. We know everything, how everybody, but we can't control our own brain. But if we learn how to control our thoughts and our mind, and what we do and what we focus our time on, we can create a very meaningful, beautiful, joyful life. And that's what the course is about. And it's called Heal with Gold. And very soon I'll be sharing with all of you. And everybody, do what Jonathan said. Be relentlessly alive, and be incredibly optimistic, and work hard at it. This is a message that I'm going to take away with me for hopefully forever. And I want to thank you for being here with us and for sharing your story and this hour with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Good day, everybody.
Bye.